It is time for us to simplify language arts. I'm Jenny with Kids Learning for Life, and after looking at the results of our year-end audience survey, the majority of you said that the hardest subject for you to teach is language arts. I'm here to point out ways that you might be making language arts way more complicated than it has to be, and I'm going to point you in the direction of some ways to make it more simple. The first tip I have is to focus on just 1 or 2 language arts curriculums at a time. I know this can be hard because English and language arts, it can be so multifaceted. Oh, and if you're a curriculum hoarder like Stacey and I are, let me know in the comments below. Quite simply, too many curriculums can really just lead to burnout and overwhelm. So in my homeschool, we do tend to stick to just 2 language arts curriculums at a time. For us, this is Explode the Code and primary language lessons. I do throw in there every now and then some lightning literature lessons, but like I said, I'm trying to keep it simple. I'm trying to keep it light. I don't want to throw too many things in there. So we only do that every now and then. Another bonus to sticking to just 1 or 2 curriculums at a time is that you're gonna save yourself some money. You're not gonna splurge on all this different curriculum that promises to teach your kids everything and then end up not using it because you simply don't have the time. So keep that in mind as well when you're trying to condense how many curriculums you are using. My next tip is to focus on just 1 or 2 language arts concepts at a time. So let me explain a little bit what I mean by that. So when we're talking about English and language arts, there are so many different concepts that do need to be taught that do fall under this language arts umbrella. Just to kind of break the fourth wall here a bit, I'm actually going to look over here because I have a list of just some of the concepts that I was able to find just by Googling what do kids need to learn in English or language arts. So let me read this list to you now. Phonics, reading comprehension, spelling, writing, creative writing, poetry recitation, literature analysis, vocabulary, grammar. This is a lot, and this isn't even all of the ones I found. I just started typing the first few that I found. So I know this can be overwhelming, and that's why I say just stick to 1 at a time. A really good example for this is Stacey's oldest son is now in 3rd grade, so he will be participating in our state's standardized testing. So she has really been focusing on him succeeding in that writing portion of the test. So she has been really just focusing on writing for him. So writing paragraphs, maybe even doing some creative writing, sentence structure, all of that. It's actually easier said than done, but once you give yourself the freedom to just focus on 1 concept at a time, you will be good to go. Another thing I do want to add to this concept of focusing on 1 concept at a time is that exposing your kids to good books and having them read a lot will actually naturally expose them to concepts like grammar and sentence structure and creative writing on its own. That's work that you as the homeschool parent don't even really need to facilitate. Focusing on reading really good quality books, otherwise known as living books, will really help with teaching all of these concepts because these are books that have stood the test of time and also are just really high quality and well written. So that's something to keep in mind to simplify language arts, is to let the books do some of the work for you. Another tip I have is to combine handwriting skills with other language arts skills. I know some people are kind of concerned with how their children's handwriting looks. I'm personally not really concerned about this. Maybe it's just because my kids have okay handwriting already, or maybe it's just my personality. But I think that if you are concerned with handwriting, you can kind of lump this in with other language arts skills. What I'm trying to say is you don't necessarily need to invest time and money into a curriculum that is just for handwriting. An example from my own homeschool is we have always used Explode the Code and Beyond the Code from the beginning, and I know that the early Explode the Code books do help with handwriting a bit so that your kids are getting some practice in with the dotted lines and everything to be able to write letters correctly. And these are the letters that they're going to be focused on within the chapter. And then you move on and there's lots of writing practice. So that's a good example of mixing phonics with handwriting, so you're not having to do 2 curriculums. You can just use 1. Now, an example that would kind of compartmentalize your homeschool a bit too much, in my opinion, is something like All About Reading. Now, I have nothing personally against the All About Reading curriculum. I have used it. It actually did work pretty well for my kids, but the only thing that I didn't like about it is that it didn't feel like a complete language arts curriculum because it is just focusing on the phonics and the reading skills. So there is no handwriting practice, not even in the activity book. So that's one thing to consider when choosing any of these language arts curriculums is how can it kind of be multi-purpose and serve multiple uses to you potentially if handwriting or other things are ones you want to lump together. Another tip I have is don't stress about progress too much. I know it's easy, especially with something like language arts, which is really measurable, to maybe fall into that pitfall of comparing your kids to other kids. Oh, my kid isn't reading yet, but that kid is, or my kid cannot write in lowercase letters yet, but that kid is writing entire paragraphs with indentations and correct punctuation. Like, it's so easy to fall into that pitfall, but you really can't do that with something like language arts. I can promise you from my own personal experience that these skills sometimes just come in time. Like, overnight, your kid might just develop a love for reading, or just the ability to read sometimes comes kind of overnight. So just stick with what you're doing, be consistent, and that progress will come in time. I don't want you to worry about falling behind or feeling like your kids are late to the game. If you do feel like you do have some legitimate concerns about your child's progress, there are ways that you can get extra help in just this one area of language arts. You can maybe try a super specific curriculum to the specific need you think your child has. You can get tutoring. Some vendors for homeschool do offer classes in certain concepts of language arts. So if you do really feel like there is something that your child is just not getting no matter what you've tried, try thinking outside the box. Maybe, pull in one of these extra resources and see if that helps. For example, for me, my oldest daughter just was not wanting to read, and she was way behind other kids I saw at her age. She didn't even have the interest in reading. So what I did is I started this thing called Free Reading Fridays. I did a video about it, so I'll make sure to link to it for you. And we just made that time just to independently read and make reading fun, not a chore. It really made all of the difference for her. It gave her that space to just read for pleasure's sake. I guess the main point with not stressing about their progress is that the stress is going to be felt by your kids, and then it won't feel fun anymore to read or write. So I just want you to make it as fun as possible and as accessible, and don't bring your own feelings about oh, I'm scared that my child isn't progressing into your homeschool, because that's not going to benefit anyone. So in closing, if you had to take just one thing away from this video, it is this. As long as you continue doing read-alouds or having your children read, I think that all other language arts concepts will be learned by them in time. You don't need to rely on expensive curriculum or follow the standards to a T. Just have them exposed to good quality books and have them read on their own, read for fun, and everything else will come naturally. I mentioned it before, but I'll mention it again. I did do a whole video on Free Reading Fridays, so I will make sure to link to that over here so you can check that out next. And I know I mentioned Explode the Code because I think it's a great use of handwriting practice and just phonics. So I will also put a link to my review of Explode the Code over here so you can check it out. See you next time. Happy homeschooling.